Hello, my name is Ash and I like to draw, but do you know what else I like? Returning to my most popular series. If you already follow me, you probably know what this is all about, but if you happen to be new, well, this is a series where I take a list of various heroes and make them square off against each other's villains, with a little bit of help from the dice. And as I go along and each hero has their turn, I replace them with new ones to make sure that future matchups stay varied and interesting. This challenge is all about me getting to do a deep dive in the many weird and wonderful characters that have existed throughout comics history, and trying to see if I can come up with some interesting, thematically appropriate, and most of all, fun encounters that we otherwise wouldn't get to see. Oh, and of course, I did give myself a little list of rules to follow for this challenge, which you can hear me go through in more detail in the first episode if you need a reminder. Now, the last two episodes I did of this, we changed things up a little bit. Going from a list of classic Marvel and DC characters to focusing on cartoons, and then to a strictly all-female episode. But you know what? I think it's about time we return to the main roster. But that's enough talk. Let's roll some dice and see who gets to knock heads with who. This time our hero is going to be Wonder Woman, going up against a Thor villain. Oh, okay, that's interesting. These two are probably the most direct DC and Marvel counterparts we have right now. Both were created in respective formative eras of comic book history. Wonder Woman as part of the initial Golden Age boom, and Thor as part of the revitalizing of the genre in the 60s. And both of them are also heavily based on mythological themes, with Thor somewhat more so than Wonder Woman because, you know, actual real-life god that people actually worshipped at one point. This has resulted in both characters having a bit of an identity crisis. On one hand, they fight costumed criminal supervillains the same as any other modern hero. But on the other, they also tend to battle gods and monsters from their respective mythologies and adopt a lot of the warrior mentalities of the ancient cultures they're based on. But the thing is, and this might be a little surprising coming from a Scandinavian, I kinda prefer when these two characters remember that they're comic book superheroes first and mythological figures second. Especially in the case of Wonder Woman. Not being based on a specific mythological figure like Thor and having that whole Stars and Stripes gimmick to her design, I often prefer Wonder Woman to stay a little bit more classic rather than going full Red Sonja and slicing down gods and monsters with a sword while decked out in full armor all the time. So even though the obvious choice here would be to find a god or a monster from Thor's foes, I'm still gonna be browsing through some of the more traditional supervillains. And thankfully, I happened to find someone in Thor's rogues gallery that satisfies both of those cravings. Roxxon CEO Dario Agger, also known as the Minotaur. That's right, there's a Greek monster in Thor's rogues gallery. I mean, that's completely insane. That's mixed mythology, that's fire and brimstone raining from the skies, rivers and seas boiling, 40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes, the dead rising from their graves, human sacrifice, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. Okay, but seriously, I actually think Dario makes for a perfect enemy for Diana for many reasons. First of all the mythological enemies Diana has fought, there has to my knowledge never been a Minotaur-themed foe in her regular rogues gallery. At best she's fought against members of a Minotaur-like species. But at the same time, Dario isn't actually a real Minotaur. He's simply a greedy, villainous prick who happens to have gained the magical ability to turn into a creature that resembles one, which he mostly uses to knock heads when he can no longer avoid getting his own hands dirty. That is until a confrontation with the Hulk reduced his Minotaur form to a skull covered in melty flesh. And since this brings into question what he'd look like if he tried to turn back into a human, it leaves him stuck looking exactly like the monster he actually is underneath all of his riches. And it also makes him look way more metal and unique than when he was just a bull wearing a nice suit, let's be honest. Now I wanted him to feel huge in this drawing, so outside of really emphasizing the cow skull and giving him giant arms, I made sure he took up a good half of the page, lifting up his arms to get ready to slam down in a Hulk-style smackdown. This is a guy who can no longer just buy his way out of a confrontation and is more than ready to flatten whoever stands in his way. Now let's take a moment to think about how this makes him a good contrast to Wonder Woman. Diana's backstory has changed many times over the decades, but the basic idea of her hailing from an island of Amazons and going to the world of man to find some way to coexist and uphold certain virtues has remained relatively consistent. So putting her in a bare-knuckle brawl against a man like Dario, who is at his core just a simple, greedy man void of empathy, feels pretty fitting to me. I also like to imagine that Diana, even if she often has to fight them, has a certain level of respect for gods and mythological creatures like the Minotaur. I mean, really, who is this insignificant little man who dares to take the Minotaur's name just to boost his own importance? If you're gonna call yourself by a mythological name, you damn well better earn it. And Dario, being just another scummy rich boy who will do anything for a buck, will never legitimately earn anything of value in his life. Hey man, I've told you before, I like to make sure there are some strong themes in my matchups, whether they're surface level or a little bit more personal. Now, I deliberately didn't draw Diana with a very specific design of hers in mind. Instead, I tried to combine elements I like from her various armored costumes with her more classic outfit. And I've always liked the solution of making her suit decal look like it's made out of actual metal and giving her a blue Grecian-style warrior skirt covered in stars. It feels like a perfect blend between the two worlds she's constantly stuck between to me. And like I said, I like when Wonder Woman looks strong and has that honorable warrior flair to her, as opposed to the sneakier Batman and the more clean-cut Superman. So I made sure to give her some muscle and scuff her up just a tiny bit. Diana should never be afraid to get up close and personal to shatter a jaw or two in my book. I mean, she was quite literally sculpted to look perfect, so I'm sure she'll bounce right back from something like this. So there it is, folks. The symbol of virtue and cooperation facing off against the monstrous beast that lurks beneath unchecked capitalism. I like to think I caught some real raw energy with this one, but you go ahead and tell me what you think in the comments. And with that, it's time to remove Wonder Woman from the list and see who will take her place. How's about Black Lightning? Alright, with that out of the way, let's see who's next. This time we're going to have Spider-Man fighting against a Batman villain. Damn, okay. We're going classic with our hero choices this episode. Real high-profile stuff. Okay, so I highly doubt I had to spend any time explaining Spider-Man or Batman to anyone watching this video. They are easily some of the most famous heroes in the entire world, and so are their many, many villains. Really, these two definitely had the most famous rogues galleries of all time. This means that there are a lot of great villains on Batman's roster that could give Spidey a good workout, especially since many of them have genuine superpowers or at least carry supervillain level tech. But there was no doubt in my mind which Batman foe Spidey needed to face, because there's no one more fitting for him than Mr. Freeze. I won't take full credit for this idea though. Two of my viewers, the Grand X Body 2073 and Iron Tiger 2622, have brought this pairing up before, so quick shout out to those guys. But the thing is, even before they suggested it, this was always in the back of my head when thinking about possible matchups. See, here's a little fact that might blow your mind when you stop to think about it, but despite having existed for over 60 years and having one of the biggest and most varied rogues galleries in all of comic book history, Spider-Man doesn't actually have a dedicated ice villain. Isn't that crazy? I mean, sure, he has probably fought some ice-themed foes from time to time in the comics. I mean, the dude's fought anyone in Marvel who has a pulse and about half the people that don't at this point. But there has never been a recurring Spider-Man specific villain of any real note that had ice abilities. The closest I can find is this lady with ice swords called Coldheart, but she's had so few appearances that she barely counts. But that's not the only reason to specifically pick Mr. Freeze as someone to fight against the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Because his origin story fits Spidey like a glove. Remember, Mr. Freeze was kind of a forgotten villain nobody cared about until he was reintroduced in the animated series in the 90s. This is when he was given his now iconic backstory of turning to crime to cure his frozen wife of a serious illness, and turning himself into a cold, unfeeling shell of a man in the process. This kind of motivation is right up Spider-Man's alley. For as many enemies he has that are just plain evil or egotistical bastards, there are just as many that have sympathetic motivations or are victims of circumstance. Now that I think about it, Mr. Freeze actually has quite a few similarities to a Spider-Man adjacent character named Cardiac, a doctor who commits crimes and steals medical equipment in order to help those that the healthcare system have failed. This in turn brings to mind one of Spider-Man's core themes, responsibility. Freeze, and to an extent Cardiac, have made themselves responsible for some people, but are willing to put other people at risk in order to help them. Now, is that actually true responsibility? Or is it really selfishness when you only care about the ones that are close to you? It's an interesting matchup both in ideology and power sets, since spiders generally don't do too well in the cold, and it gives me a perfect opportunity to draw an action piece set in Freeze's lair. I mean, Spidey is absolutely the kind of hero who would track him back there, learn about Nora, and spend the entire fight trying to talk Freeze down and offer to help. And sadly, Freeze is exactly the kind of guy to get so caught up in his motivation that he fails to realize that he was just offered genuine warmth from another person. #deep. So not only would Spidey jumping around dodging Freeze rays makes for a fantastic fight to watch, It would also make for a compelling story that I, for one, would love to read. Off the list you go, so we can replace you with, let's say, Hawkeye. Yeah, why not? You'd be surprised how many foes he has. Well, that'll have to be it for now. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this more classically inclined episode of Villain Swap, and that you think I did these characters justice. And speaking of what you think, why don't you tell me a little more about that in the comments below? Tell me what villains you would have put Spidey and Wonder Woman up against, and what heroes you hope to see in the future of this series. And while you're down there, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more art videos in the future. I'll see you there, folks. Bye bye.